Wallace Stevens once said, "The most beautiful thing in the world is, of course, the world itself." My guest today, Jacob Lemanski, knows this better than most. He spent 999 days bicycling around the world. Get ready to experience the journey through his eyes, feel the wonder, and maybe even shed a tear of joy. An incredible adventure awaits. Let's dive in with Jacob Lemanski. Welcome to Journey with Jake. This is a podcast about adventure and how through our adventures we can overcome the challenges of life that come our way. While I expect you will learn some things about different adventures, this show will entertain you. Each episode will feature a different guest or guests as they share experiences and stories from the different adventures they have been on. Not only will you be entertained, but you will also hear the failures and trials each guest faces and what they have done or are doing to overcome the hardships that come their way. My goal is to take each of us on a journey through the experiences of my guests with the hope that you'll be entertained and inspired to overcome your day-to-day challenges. After all, it's not all about the destination as it is about the journey. To the show. I'm Jake Bushman, your host of Journey with Jake. Today I'm joined by Jacob Lemanski, who spent an incredible 999 days biking around the world. We're about to dive into his unforgettable adventure, so get ready for an inspiring ride. Before we jump in, just a few quick reminders. Journey with Jake is part of the Podmatch Podcast Network. If you're looking for more great podcasts, head over to podmatch.com/network to check out the amazing shows available. I would love to hear from you. The best way to connect is through Instagram. Send me a direct message at Jake at Journey with Jake Podcast. You can also reach me through email at jake@journeywithjake.net. Want to watch the show? Journey with Jake is on YouTube, so be sure to subscribe and hit that like button while you're there. And if you haven't already, I'd really appreciate if you could leave a rating and review. It's one of the best ways to help more people discover the show and join the journey. Now, biking around the world for over 2.5 years is no small feat, and Jacob Lemanski has some incredible stories to share. If you love this episode, be sure to check out episode 108 with Chris Donaldson, where he talks about his journey motorbiking around the world on his Moto Guzzi Le Mans. All right, let's get to my conversation with Jacob Lemanski. I'm excited today because I have Jacob Lemanski with me today. Jacob, I've looked you up a little bit. I've watched some of your podcast videos. What you did was amazing. You went around the world twice on your bicycle. We're going to dive into all of that. Before we do that, though, Jacob, tell me a little bit about who you are, where you're from, kind of give us a little background.
Hey, I grew up in rural Pennsylvania and went to school at West Virginia University. My background is engineering. I got degrees in aerospace and mechanical engineering. And after school, I moved out to Colorado, to Boulder. And I was living out here and working for 6 years. I was designing air conditioners for helicopters. And when I had enough of that, I decided to go ride my bike as far as I could.
Okay. How do you just out of the blue come up with the decision, I'm going to ride my bike and just see where it takes me?
Well, I'd done a bike tour in the past. In the summer when I was 20, I biked across the United States. And, it was 60 days, about 70 miles a day. And it got me in good shape. And it just built this fitness that just recreationally I kept at for years. And at some point I got it in my head. I realized I'll only be young once in my life. How strong can I be with a young man's body? And it became so important that I decided to bike around the world to figure it out.
Wow. All right, let's go back to, we're going to jump back a little bit to your childhood a little bit. You from a big family, small family? Kind of what's the sisters, brothers? What do you got?
Yeah, 2 sisters. I'm a middle child.
Okay.
Played sports growing up. Pretty good student. Went off to West Virginia, partly for the outdoors. It's beautiful in the Appalachians.
And were you riding your bike as a kid a lot? Did you always enjoy riding bikes?
That cross-country bike tour was really my first big experience biking. I had to buy a bicycle for that trip. So it's not like I had any big foundation of biking when I was a kid. It's just inspired to try something new one summer, and that I happened to find something I love. How fortunate.
Yeah, absolutely. And was that bike trip you did across the country, you said you were 20 years old when you did that?
I was 20, yeah.
So were you still going to West Virginia at the time?
I was still in school. Um, yeah, just taking, instead of getting a job in the summer, I decided to go ride my bike.
Ride your
And
bike.
what a good decision.
Oh, okay. Why do you think, why was it such a good decision for you? You just loved it so much? Like, what was it about that trip?
Well, it built up my confidence. It gave me something to talk about. What's a 20-year-old have to talk about? Not that much. And suddenly I had ridden my bike across the country. People liked that about me. They thought it was interesting. And so it helped me become interesting.
I like that. So then you moved to Colorado, you graduate, you moved to Colorado for your job. It sounds like that's where you kind of had your job as an engineer doing air conditioning, you said, for helicopters.
Yeah. Everything you touch was designed by an engineer. So
That's true. Well, you have to have skills to be an engineer. I think the neat part too, Colorado is a beautiful state. I'm sure you got a lot of bike riding in Colorado. Did you kind of keep that up then when you moved to Colorado, even if it was just around where you lived?
yeah, I would bicycle. I would run a lot. I really liked running a lot back then. I would get a map of the town I was living in. I did it in my college town and then in Boulder, and I would run every single road on the map. In college, it took all 4 years, and in Boulder, it took me 6 years to get every road. Fitness was my hobby. So that's what I was doing.
What does fitness do for you mentally?
Well, I mean, the endorphins are amazing just as a mood elevator. Um, it feels really good to be healthy and to be strong, to be able to bicycle up a mountain and just know that you can do it. It helps me move through life.
All right, now the big question comes. All right, you decide I'm going to bike around the world. And I think if I'm not mistaken, and correct me if I'm wrong here, you didn't really have like a time or destination. I mean, you just kind of said, I'm going to go bike and you'll kind of see where it takes you. Am I saying that right? Or how was that for you?
Yeah, so I had done that across the United States when I was younger, and I thought if I crossed from ocean to ocean across Europe and Asia, that would complete a lap around the world in my life. And so I flew to Portugal to start, and I was trying to bike around the world, but really I was just trying to go as far as I could. That cross country trip that took 2 months, by the end of that, I was ready to be done. It's a long time to be out. And so when I left to Portugal to bike around the world, I didn't actually expect I'd be able to do it. I thought I would go maybe 4 or 6 months and be done, go home.
And it didn't happen like that. It happened a little differently. And we'll talk about that in a second. I want to go to the mindset before you left. Because you have a job, you're an engineer, you got a job. How did that happen? You just decided I mean, I'm guessing you had to quit your job. I mean, what was going through your mind when in the build up to it? Like, when did you make the decision? And then what was that like leading up to it?
Yeah, I made the decision a year before I left. I was out for a jog, and I was always pushing myself just to, like I said, to see how strong I could be. And the idea came to try and bike around the world. And it was in my personality. That's all I needed. Just that little idea, something to chase really hard. And yeah, it took me a year to actually build up the confidence to do it. I had money saved from being an engineer. They paid me well enough to save money to go on this trip, but not well enough to stay, is how I put it. So, quitting wasn't that hard. Like I said, I was going to be young once in my life, and I needed to know how strong I could be. So I wasn't going to let the opportunity pass. And I left. I was 29 when I started the journey.
Gotcha. Okay. And what year was this that you started?
2013.
Okay. So we're looking at 12 years ago or so. Reactions then, because I know you said you have two sisters, your family. You had a girlfriend too at the time.
Mm-hmm.
What was the reaction of everybody around you when you said, hey, this is what I'm doing?
Well, they could be more or less encouraging, So my girlfriend, I already had the idea I was going to bike around the world when I met her. So she was just part of me the whole time she had known me. And my family, they knew me well enough not to tell me to stay, but that wasn't going to get anywhere, was it, for me? They were nervous. They were nervous the whole time I was out there. And in lots of ways, they didn't like me doing it, but they were as supportive as they could be. I had a tracking device that I would push a button each night and it would let them know where I was sleeping. And it was one way. So I didn't know if it worked. Most nights that was great for them, but if it didn't work for a night or two, they would really start to get nervous.
Gotcha. Okay, interesting. So you didn't know if it was actually working or not. You just pushed the button and hope it was working.
goes to a satellite and hopefully they get an email. Yeah.
Jacob is here, whatever. Yeah. Wow. Okay. This is just, it's incredible how someone like you just, you make the decision, I'm going to do this. I'm going to go bike around the world. And then it took you a year, build up your confidence, some planning. And I want to ask about that planning. How much planning goes into this? I mean, did you kind of have an idea of what route you were going to take? Did you look at that? Like, what kind of planning did you have for this?
Yeah, I planned my gear really well. I wanted just the most robust equipment that I could, just the best kit I could come up with. I slept in a hammock the whole time. I mean, I had a backup tent, but like being in a hammock was an important part of it for me. I wanted to be like a ship at sea. I wanted to leave and not have to purchase anything. I wanted to have everything I needed, save for food and water. I would buy
Sure.
those along the way. But this also meant all my gear was just wearing out. My clothes would just fall apart on my body. That was like part of the experience I was going for. And so that's the gear side. The route side, I flew to Portugal and I went east. That's as much planning as I did. I guess I'll say I checked where I needed a visa ahead of time,
Okay.
which in the
Gotcha.
whole world was only Russia and China. But besides that, I never researched the routes because, like I said, I didn't know how far I was going, and I wanted to feel like I was having an adventure. You can Google Maps Street View most of the places I went, but that wasn't my goal. I wanted to arrive and feel like I discovered the place myself.
Gotcha. Okay. So in your mind, then you weren't necessarily, having a strict plan. I'm kind of a planner type. So for me, that it's tough for me to like just say, let me just go somewhere and see what happens. But it sounds like for you though, that's kind of what you wanted. You kind of wanted to just go and see what it brought you. Is that
I wanted to feel like an explorer. And then like I looked into like bringing maps with me, but at the detail that I needed, I would have a thick stack of maps. Like it didn't make sense. I was just crossing countries too fast and things come up like why plan it all? As far as I needed to plan was really just to the next grocery store. And also since I wasn't trying to get anywhere, I was just trying to go as far as I could. Um, to think months ahead didn't make sense either.
why would you? Yeah, this is so interesting because a lot of people I've talked to, they've kind of had a set plan, in so many hours, I'm going to do this, or I'm going to do this for the next 8 months. You didn't really have that at all. You were just like, let's just go see where it takes me. I just find it fascinating. It's just interesting kind of hearing your perspective on it. This is pretty wild to me.
Yeah, I was traveling for 1,000 days. And if I knew at the start that I was going to be out for 1,000 days, I might not have been able to start. That's daunting. How daunting to leave for so long. But to only have to bicycle today, on and on, that I could handle. You know, uh, yeah. In the sense of how long I was out there and how much planning I had to do, I didn't worry about it.
Wow. So yeah, let's take a look at some of these stats. So 1,000+ days is how long you were gone.
Well, it's actually 999. And I had stopped counting years before. So to bite one more day for the sake of counting it would have been insane.
Wow. Okay. That's just incredible. Okay. So yeah, this was years, not just months. This was years in the making. 6 continents. So I guess Antarctica is that probably the only continent you didn't hit.
Skipped Antarctica. Yep.
Antarctica, 38,000+ miles. Is that what's that kind of what it came out to?
That's what I came up with. My bike computer broke around 20,000. So it's an estimate after that.
Gotcha. Okay. And all self-supported. You just did this on your own. Amazing.
I would just stop at grocery stores to get what I needed and sleep it out each night in the farm fields.
Wow. Amazing. All right. A couple things that you talked about, and I watched your trailer for your podcast that you're doing, and let's talk about that for a minute though, because your podcast that you have about your adventures, about these years of biking, it's a day by day. Kind of give us the recap of what the podcast is so people know.
Yeah, the concept with the podcast, I kept the journal I was out there mainly just to give me something to do, and I would monologue at it and then email it to my friends, and that was enough connection to keep me from feeling too lonely, I guess. And so I returned home with this 500,000 word journal, and I've been editing it since then, turning it just from this rough draft into a well told, interesting story. And the idea of doing it day by day is the epic length of the journey is a big part of it. And getting to the place where I quit, I want to bring people all the way there. I want them to also be ready to quit. By the time I finished, I felt just so alone in the experience. Who could I talk to about it that had done something similar? Um, and so in telling it this way, telling it so completely and so fully, maybe by the end, people will get it.
Interesting way to look at it. I like how you do that. I listened to a few of your days, not all of them. Obviously, you got a lot, and you're still putting them out. They're still coming out as we go. But I listened to a few of the days. I love the way you did it. You kind of showed the route you're on, and then you kind of showed some pictures and things. And so it's How to Move the Stars on YouTube, correct? Is that where I can find it?
Yeah, the podcast is How to Move the Stars. It's on YouTube. Yeah, the video has the route of the day and the pictures. Just the audio you can find anywhere you get podcasts. And each episode's like 2 minutes. They're short, and it's 2 episodes a week. And so it's going to come out over 10 years. And it's an experiment just to have people listen to something for that long. They're going to be crossing continents with me. And one day, 10 years from now, they'll think back to hearing me and you talk and start.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I love it. Like I said, I started listening to some of it, and I was just like, wow, I love the way you did it. I think that's a great concept. Let's go to day one then. Let's go to Portugal. That's where you started. What's going through your mind? Are you amped up? How you feeling day one?
Well, I was nervous. This was my first time out of the country, and I was glad to have my girlfriend with me at the time. She spoke some Spanish, not Portuguese, which might have been more useful, but some Spanish helped. And it was raining when I arrived. I got out my tablet to figure out where our hotel was, and it got wet. And then I was lost. I hadn't even left the airport, and that's how it started. Partly I was able to start because I was just ignorant on what I was getting myself into. If I knew better, how long it's going to be, how dangerous it's going to be, just the challenge of it, I don't know if I would have stayed home, but it would have been harder, for sure.
Well, without a doubt. And you said, earlier you mentioned, 1,000 days. If you're sitting day one and you know it's going to be 1,000 days, you might be kind of like, maybe not,
I met people out there that were doing kind of the same route as me, but they knew it when they started. They had it all planned out. And I would meet them and just think like, you're not going to make it. You're counting down 1,000 days. That's so many days to count down to get to the end, which is your whole point. I wasn't traveling like that. I only had to enjoy today. So
great way to look at it.
Even from day one, that's how I was thinking about it.
It's kind of nice from day one too. You said you had your girlfriend with you. I'm guessing though she wasn't with you all 1,000 days. How long was she with you?
Yeah, she joined me for the first 2 months.
Okay.
By the end of my journey, she was married to somebody else. That's how long it was.
Wow. Okay. Well, I'm glad you said that because how did she enjoy those 2 months? Did she enjoy it, or was it like, she's probably like, dude, this is like you, not me.
She enjoyed it. Yeah, it was fun for her.
Good.
But then, I was on the road a long time. And, eventually we split up, but honestly, it freed me a little bit more just to be out there and be present because I didn't have anyone pulling me back home,
Wow. Amazing. Okay. Wow. So she was married when you got back. Incredible. Awesome. I didn't know that was going to go that way, but it's
a long trip.
Fun. Yeah. It's a long trip. All right. So day one, kind of rainy, your tablet gets wet. You're getting kind of, right from the get go, it's kind of like, whoa, but you're amped up, a little scared, a little nervous. And then you hit it. Now, a couple things that you mentioned on the trailer. You said you had moments that were dangerous, where you barely survived. I got to hear about one or two of these. Do you have any experiences you can share?
Well, it's a lot of time just being on the road for vehicles to come sliding past you. So I had close calls with cars, but one close call I had, I was just thinking about it lately. I was coming down a mountain in Peru, and these mountains are massive. I would drop 6,000 feet in a single downhill. And on this road, it was well paved, but there was this little, just thin stream of water crossing the road. And my front wheel slipped a little bit on that water as I was crossing it. And I ended up My bike swung under me twice. I tried to save it. I tried to save it again. And then I pitched over and I flew off over the front of my bike and landed hard on my shoulder and slid to a stop in the dirt. I was hurt, but I was okay. I was okay enough to heal and continue. My front wheel was damaged, but what could have been worse was if a car is coming the other way, I would have smacked headfirst into him. The road was on the edge of a mountain. If I had, I went to the right side of the road. If I had gone to the left side of the road, I would have shot off of a cliff. That's 50 feet of being out of control, puts you in a real dangerous spot. So that was an example of, I'm glad I didn't shoot off a cliff.
Yeah. No kidding. Wow. How about little things like, because you're out there for 1,000 days. I mean, well, a couple things. First of all, you said you slept in a hammock. Were you just outside pretty much the whole time, sleeping outside?
Yeah, I would sleep inside maybe once a month.
Okay.
I'd get to a town. It would be too late in the day to leave town again. So I'd find a hotel.
Gotcha.
But I prefer just sleeping out in the forest and going out in the farm fields. Because honestly, a lot of places it's easier to find a farm field to sleep in than a hotel. So I would go racing out of town to go sleep outside.
And I'm guessing, you're probably cooking your own food, that sort of thing. You're camping.
Mm-hmm.
Probably not taking too many showers, I'm thinking. I mean, you're just kind of hitting it, right? I mean, I guess when you camp once, or when you stay in a hotel once a month, maybe then you would get a shower, that kind of thing.
My longest stretch was 42 days crossing Alaska and Canada, and not even no shower. I didn't even bother taking my clothes off because it was cold. I just had the same thing that whole time. And like I said, I would just keep wearing my clothes and they'd get so many holes, it would look like spider webs. And then people would start giving me clothes. I mean, I looked in a way I was homeless.
Yeah, for sure. People are helping you out. I love that. So that's one thing. So where you stayed. So maybe once a month you would hit up a hotel, but otherwise you're sleeping in your hammock, and all kinds of weather too, I'm guessing. Hot, cold. I mean, you kind of experienced it all.
Yeah, I lived outside. I mean, the weather is totally just part of my experience. From Alaska was cold, then it got hot down through Central America, and then it got cold again. The coldest it ever would get up in the mountains in the Andes. I would keep my water bottle inside of my sleeping bag to keep it from freezing.
Wow.
But it would still freeze.
Wow. That's cold. My goodness. And then heat wise, I'm like you said, going through some humidity in Central America, things like that was probably tough.
The humidity was tough. I crossed the Gobi Desert. That was hot. Out in the Gobi Desert, there are not a lot of houses out there. This is on the border of China and Mongolia. And, as I'm bicycling into these new terrains or into this new climate. So I'm not like flying and just arriving in the middle of the desert. I approach it and I would keep running out of water as I got further into the desert. And I would buy more. I'd run out of water. I'd get to the next town. I'd buy more than the last time. And I kept doing that until eventually I was leaving town with over 50 pounds of water. I would leave with 22 liters. And that would be enough to get me 3 days. And that's the amount of water I needed out there. Fortunately, I was arriving into these deserts slow enough that I just wasn't getting caught totally off guard, just a little bit off guard.
Wow. Another thing you mentioned, you talked about you would cry tears of joy over things. And what are some of those examples when you would cry tears of joy?
I call it a perfect moment. And I would just have these experiences where I was just totally present in the surroundings and, amped from the endorphins of climbing a hill all day and nowhere to be, nowhere to go, nothing to do even, just completely present in a place that's profoundly beautiful. And I'd just be there alone. And in these moments, I couldn't imagine anything better.
Love it.
Yeah, I miss it.
Any particular memory of a certain place where, that happened on I'm sure there's quite a few, but just one or two examples.
I remember I'd find these places to camp on the beach where I could watch the sunset over the water. And I remember being down on the Yucatan Peninsula. I guess in this case, I was looking north, but anyways, the sun was up there over the water and beautiful, and the ocean waves were coming in, birds were singing. I was laying in my hammock, comfortable. I would sneak in so no one knew where I was. I would feel safest if no one in the world knew where I was. And I had found a beautiful spot in these little mangrove trees along the water, and I felt safe. It's just joyous to find myself somewhere like that, and to know that I brought myself there through hundreds of days of effort.
Yeah, without a doubt. And you talk about being present. What does that look like for you then each day when you're out there being present?
It's to get into that state, I had to have a clear schedule for the rest of my life. I had nothing planned. I had nothing at home pulling me back. I had enough money to not have to worry about it for years. I mean, I was homeless, but wasn't spending, I had money to live that way. I had no worries. From this place, all I had to do was ride my bike and enjoy my surroundings. There really was nothing else to do. And after years of this, there was nothing else even to think about. I could exist. I could just exist.
You were just there.
I was just there. And it became all the way to the extent where towards the end of the ride, I'm bicycling, I'm doing this. If I were to die out there, if a car hit me or something, I would just be doing that. It didn't even make sense to think about it differently. I was just present in both cases, alive or dead. And I don't think that way anymore. That's a far out way to think, but years alone on your bike, you end up thinking far out things.
Yeah, I'm guessing. Tell me about that. When you're out there just trudging along and you're by yourself, Katie's long gone at this point. You've been out there for a couple of years. Do you have inner dialogue? Like, what's your mind doing? Are you talking to yourself? Like, what's going on?
Yeah, I'm looking around. I just have a monologue going in my head. I got good at just having a quiet mind and really thinking about nothing. But to say I was good at it, maybe I can maintain that for 30 seconds, just a quiet, still mind. Hey, that's pretty good.
It's really
not
good.
Think about anything.
In today's world, that's really good.
Yeah. So I felt like I had become, an excellent meditator out there. It was just 6 hours of pedaling, and I wouldn't use headphones. I'm just observing my surroundings. Well, always somewhere new, and I can compare them to where I was. And as an engineer, I'm also looking around it. I'm on the road all the time. So I'm like, what's the quality of the road construction? I'm passing all these buildings. What's the construction in this area? Can I pick up anything in the culture? I remember going down through the Andes, every town, every 30 or 50 miles, everyone was wearing a different style of hat. That's how they would identify where they were from. But just going along, just noticing all these little details, just changing from one place to the next, even seeing how the faces change as I pedal between different cultures and genealogies.
Yeah. It's amazing too, because you had never been out of the country before until you did this trip. That's amazing too. The fact that you hadn't been international at all. And now you're seeing all these different cultures and things. I do want to hit on that a little bit because I'm sure you had a lot of just different run-ins with different cultures, different people. Any particular place that comes to mind where you're like, oh, those people were great? Anything like that where you actually talked to the people and kind of got involved with the culture a little bit?
Yeah, people were always very interested in what I was doing and wanting to be helpful. In the United States, I met people wanting to be helpful. They'd give me cash. In other parts of the world, they give me food or a place to stay. I got offered places to stay, but there was nowhere that ever felt hostile. Even in places where I might have expected it, people were friendly. And as far as immersing myself in cultures, I was always just passing through. It was never really my thing just to be still in a place. That being said, some cultures stretch a long ways. I was in Russia for almost 2 months. And, even within a region, that you can see how the homes change and the people change and the way they live changes from place to place, even within countries.
Did you pass through the Middle East, like Iran or any of those countries?
I went north around it. So
Went north.
I went through Eastern Europe into Ukraine and then across southern Russia.
Then. Gotcha. Okay. Very good. I've heard a few people who've gone through Iran before, and they said those people there are just incredible. So I was just curious if you had or not.
I heard that as well. I'm not sure why I went north. It just seemed easier to pass less borders.
Sure. Yeah, for sure. And that makes sense. That absolutely makes sense. This is amazing. So another thing that you talked, well, we kind of touched on this already, but You mentioned it's, this whole process was, the inner world of a man pushing himself. And that's something you did. With not having a set end date, not having a set time, how did you keep pushing yourself day after day?
I just loved it. All I was trying to do was ride my bike and sleep somewhere beautiful. And I could just keep doing that. I knew I was getting close to the end the first time I woke up and didn't want to just go ride my bike and sleep somewhere new. I was camping. I just took a day off and didn't go anywhere. And I knew I was getting close. And that would maybe 920 days after I started, something like that.
All right, we got to go. Let's jump then to the end. I wondered about that. I wondered, okay, at what point were you like, all right, this is good, I'm done? Where were you when you finished? And what was that? And what was going through your mind? Kind of what was the thought process?
I was in Africa when I got to the end. It had been a long time coming to that point. I consider the outward going out part of the journey across Europe and Asia, and then from Alaska to the southern tip of South America. The southern tip of South America was the summit. That was the top. And from there, I was going back home. I didn't want to fly back home. I wanted to take myself back home the way explorers used to have to. And it was different mentally. Going out is ambitious and it's fiery, and going home is patience. All you can do is wait to get there, especially traveling at the pace of a bike. So from South America, it was maybe 250 days making my way back home I crossed New Zealand, I crossed Australia, I was headed north across Africa, heading finding some way back to the US. And in Africa itself had just some challenges that the roads were real flat and straight and long. And I've done that before. I did it several times around the world. So to do it again was hard. I didn't have a phone out there. I had a tablet and I would send emails when I found Wi-Fi. And in Africa, suddenly I was going 2 weeks or 3 weeks without being able to connect with anyone at home. So that became hard. And I had been out there for 950 days. Eventually it became too much for me. And I figured it out. I went as far as I could. And I got to a point that if I could have teleported home, I would have. I had to be done. I had to be done right then. But no one was coming for me. It took another 50 days to get home. I had to bicycle to an airport and on and on. I figured it out though. Like I still feel it in my bones. I went as far as I could.
I find that part interesting because, once you decided I did enough, you were satisfied and you were good with what you did. Like you said, you wish you could have teleported yourself at that point because you're like, I'm done. But you still had to muster through those next 50 days. Were those days tough? Like, were those comparatively? I mean, I guess a lot of your days were tough. Don't get me wrong. But was it tough just because you were like, you knew you were done mentally? Did it make it harder?
Yeah. The whole rest of the way home was just really, I learned to be patient out there, but man, it was totally hard to wait another 50 days to go home after being gone for 900. And really, by the end, it wasn't like what does motivate someone to go another day after being out for so long. And eventually I didn't know myself.
Yeah. And where did you go home to? Did you go home to Colorado? Did you have a place in Colorado still, or how did that work out?
Yeah, back to Boulder, the house I was living in, my buddy was still living there. So I had some stuff in the basement and I went back to that house.
So let's see, when did you get home then?
2016.
Okay, so 2016. So it's been, 9 years or so. When you look back on it, what do you want people, when people think Jacob Lemanski, what do you want people to think about when they think about you? And what do you think about yourself?
I think about the experience as I feel like I captured humanity and a human experience, not in a picture or conversation or a story, but I experienced all of humanity. Got to know the earth. I stepped on the ground all over the world. When I got home, I had this really interesting feeling. I could stand on top of a hill and look to the horizon. And I had this visceral sense of how large the earth was beneath me because I had just circled it. And with this story, I'm trying to give the experience of humanity to all the people that couldn't do such a thing. That's partly why I'm telling it in such a long full format because I'm not just trying to tell my story. I'm trying to give the experience to people.
I love that. And like I said, I've started listening and watching it on YouTube, and I enjoy it as well because I feel like, yeah, I'm not going to be able to get out there, Jacob, and go right around the world, but I can with you, and I can experience it with you. And so I appreciate the fact that you've done that. What does the future hold for you? Are you back being an engineer? What do you got going on? What do you want to do?
While I traveled, the only thing I missed was this ant farm I left at home. I missed it like a pet. And so I got home, I got that old ant farm restarted, and I got looking at it one night. My roommate came out and gave me the first hit of LSD I ever tried. And tripping with my ants that night, I conceived to build the world's most beautiful ant farm. And just like I took that bike ride as far as I possibly could, my attention settled on an ant farm and I went with it. 6 months later, I filled up my basement with these ant farms, including the largest one is the size of a sheet of plywood, 4 feet by 8 feet. I build the frames and put lights inside the frames, and they shine on this space nebula background, which then shines out through the tunnels of the ants as they dig. So I came home, and this is how I integrated the experience. I miss being an engineer and building stuff, and I ended up coming up with this really beautiful art piece that was just so good and so interesting that I haven't been able to let it go. I've been selling these with my art's called Ant Life is the company I started. So I have an art company that I built giant ant farms.
Wow. I love it. This is why I love doing this show. I meet some incredible people. I got Jacob Lemanski here who, took a hit of LSD while he was staring at his ant farm, and now look at, he sells ant farms, which is awesome. I didn't even know that about you.
I just circled the earth twice, and then I found myself building the world's largest, trippiest ant farm. And man, I just felt so far out.
Oh, that's wild. The question I always like to ask, this has been fascinating. I really appreciate you sharing who you are and what you've done. Again, I encourage everybody, How to Move the Stars. Check it out. The podcast audio version plus YouTube version. Got some pictures in the root a little bit, which is a lot of fun. So I recommend anybody do that. I always like to know then, for you, Jacob, what does adventure mean to you?
Adventure to me, for myself, I'm trying to just really experience I want to find the extremes of human experience, emotionally and, physically for myself. How strong could I be? But, I just want to be brought to these places where I can't find in my everyday life, whether it's a perfect moment of joy or, pain and sadness when I wreck my bike and realize I didn't shoot off the cliff. So adventure to me is just seeking these experiences that bring me to these extremes.
Very well said. Jacob, thank you so much for coming on Journey with Jake.
Yeah, thanks so much, Jake.
A huge thank you to my guest, Jacob Lemanski, for coming on the show and sharing his incredible experiences biking around the world. If you're fascinated by his journey, I highly recommend checking out his podcast, How to Move the Stars, where he recounts his entire 999-day adventure, one day at a time, in short, quick episodes. You can find it on any podcast platform. If you'd like to see his route and some amazing photos, head over to How to Move the Stars on YouTube. You can also follow him on Instagram at How to Move Stars for more updates. And if you're curious about his unique ant farm artwork, visit antlife.space to check it out. Jacob, thank you again for sharing your journey and who you are with us. And to all of you listening, thank you for tuning into Journey with Jake. I truly appreciate you being here. If you enjoyed this episode, I'd love for you to share it with your family and friends. That means the world to me. Coming up next week, I'm joined by Jorge Salas Guevara, who runs his own travel company, specializing in unique and unforgettable adventures. It's going to be another fantastic episode you won't want to miss. Just remember, it's not always about the destination as it is about the journey. Take care, everybody.